and then you're going to say it's now.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Speedway Soccer, and this is the big dog tonight. We are here for the MLS season preview episode. We've been waiting for it. We know you've been waiting for it too. I am Davey Shepard. I'll be hosting your episode tonight. Briefly, you just saw the beautiful face of Andy Simmons. He's going to be in the wings for us producing tonight's episode. And we're joined tonight by Ben Wright, Jonathan Slape, and Lucas Panzica. Lucas asked me to skip the intros for him, so I'm going to honor that request from last week. Hey, listen, guys, good to be here tonight. Thrilled. Check us out on Twitter at Speedway Soccer if you're not there already. We got a great episode tonight. Sat down with Tom Bogert earlier. Ben and I did to chat league perspective with a national author covering this team and this league earlier. I think you're really, really going to enjoy that. And we've got a lot to get through, so I say we just kind of dig right in and get down to it. But first off, guys, how are we tonight? How's everybody doing?
Doing well. Excited for soccer to be back that we can actually watch.
Can't believe we're less than a week away.
That's the key, right? Able to watch. That's the most important part. And we will be able to do that, as Ben points out to me in the chat. Only one C on Speedway Sock. Again, I'm lucky I even knew what it was there. So
yeah, that's. I can tell you one thing. MLS Twitter was fired up this morning.
They were fired up first thing this morning. Wes Bowling with a really, really good tweet that I retweeted. If you didn't see that already. Let's lead with that, right? The news of the day, Gary Smith signs a 2-year contract extension through 2023. And I think all of us just agree, completely well-deserved. He has set the pace. He's set the tone for this club, off to a great start in MLS, carrying on from USL. And the big important things that Wes tweeted out, and we'll talk a little bit more about MLS Twitter being fired up this morning, is that Gary Smith has made the playoffs in every season that he's been with Nashville Soccer Club, and he's taken at least a point in 73% of his matches. And it kind of brings me to a question. This is a big topic, and we don't have to go into the weeds on this, but is he like maybe one of the most underrated managers in the league, you guys think?
I mean, I would say yes. I think even conversations that I've had with other MLS fans and other people.
I mean, conversations we've had in our chats. Like,
yeah, in our chat, and like I would say he's underrated in the Nashville fan base, and I think he's underrated. I mean, I think he's underrated in the fan base, and I know I can guarantee he is underrated nationally. He doesn't play the most attractive soccer, which Davey, I know you've always talked about. It as long as it gets results, it doesn't really matter to you. But I think that making the playoffs, and I was a little hesitant on the hire when he was announced as being brought over from USL, because it didn't seem necessarily the most inspired pick. But I mean, he's proved us wrong. I mean, you've been the most successful expansion franchise in the playoffs, other than the team that went and won it in their first year. So definitely well deserved, and definitely underrated.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's underrated. I think probably around MLS, he has a reputation of not doing anything special tactically. I mean, he plays. I don't want to say it's like a throwback style, but I mean, he's not like changing the game. But at the same time, his teams are always defensively solid. He got an expansion team to turn out one of the best defenses in league history. I mean, and there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, if it was easy and if it was simplistic, everybody would be doing it, and they're not. So I mean, I think he gives Nashville a foundation, and he's set them up for long-term success in ways that not a ton of expansion managers have.
Yeah, I think the other thing. Go ahead, Lucas.
I was just going to Ben's point, that there's two sides to that coin, right? He's not bringing constantly new, innovative ideas, changing the shape every other week, but it's consistency, right? Mm-hmm. And a hard-nosed brand that I think the word to describe Gary Smith to me is even-keeled. I mean, he's always the same guy, game in and game out. I think that appeals to players. I think a lot of players identify with him, and just consistency. You know what you're going to get from a Gary Smith coach team.
Yeah, and I think to a point that, Wes is the tweet that Davey's referring from Wes, but Andrew Wiebe saying, because the narrative is always that Gary Smith is a defensive coach, but, Wiebe at MLS Extra Time said, just remembering, the times that Nashville has struggled to score. And I think a lot of people do also, those Colorado teams stick out a lot. And those Colorado teams, I would say, are completely different. And it's a completely different league to the one that of this Nashville team in the league that Nashville's playing in.
And I responded to Weeby too with this, and I don't know how much it matters because I think the results are fairly similar, but I don't think Nashville ever went out intending to be a defensive only team. Like they didn't go out from day one and park the bus. They tried to create chances. They tried to press. I mean, I think they pressed well at times. They didn't create or finish chances well for 2/3 of the season, but I don't think the lack of goal scoring wasn't because they weren't trying to score and just saying, okay, we're not going to score. We're just going to park the bus. I think it was just growing pains. So yeah, I don't know. I get why Wes initially started with the with a tweet that he did saying that he kind of gets a bad rap. But I think it's probably a little bit more nuanced than the Twitter discussion.
Denzel on Twitter had a really good kind of reply to me, I thought, earlier. He said, his style made me appreciate the defensive elements of the game. Before, I really only understood the attacking logic, had no idea how to identify a good defense. A good defense is beautiful in its own way. And you
That's
guys know
really
I've
good.
been saying stuff like that for a long time. Hopefully we've got some new people watching. I know we pick up random Broadway people. Shout out Titans questions if you got them. Shout out Preds questions if you got them. Please shout out NSC questions if you got them too. But for those who haven't listened to us before, I used to coach American football. My brother's a defensive coordinator. My stepdad's a defensive coordinator, so I'm very familiar with football. I love defense. I've always liked it. I think it's the best thing about sports. The idea that no matter how good you are at scoring in whatever the sport might be, if I'm good at defense, I can stop you from doing the thing that you must do to win a game. I think it's the best thing about sports. So I love Gary Smith. I grew up watching soccer on Jose Mourinho at Chelsea. I love the way Gary Smith coaches. And I hate that it's like some kind of slur that we use, that he's a defensive coach. There's nothing wrong with that. And to me, that's my only gripe with Wes, is that I think Wes kind of, by trying to not buy into the logic that the national crew runs with, he's almost buying into it by being so defensive about the idea that Gary is a defensive coach. And I just don't – there's no reason to be defensive. Does he get results or not? He gets results in 73% of the matches. That's all that matters.
Yeah. I mean, I think that does it. I don't think you can put it much better than that.
All right, guys, we got a tight schedule tonight, so I got to keep us moving along here. Gary Smith, credit to him, well-deserved extension. And you know what? Look, we've been tough on him at points. The guy has absolutely gotten results. And he said it really, really well today, Ben. I think me and you were both on the presser. He said it and said, look, we're 2 games away or a couple of games away from being on the hot seat. That's just the truth of coaching. I don't think that's actually the case with this ownership group and Ian and Mike. But he knows he's got to go out there and keep that string of results going. And
hey, one other thing, kind of on a more personal level. I mean, say what you will about the results on the field. I mean, off the field, from everything we've seen, he's just been a class act. He's always great with the media.
Terrific to deal with.
He gives thoughtful answers to no matter what question you give him. He gives great answers, and just seems like just a really good guy off the field and in the community. So, I mean, from that standpoint, it's great to have him around for another couple of years.
And that accent.
You gotta love the accent.
How did it take us this long to bring that up?
I know you're absolutely right. All right, guys, big picture, Major League Soccer 2021 season. Here we go. Andy, I think you've got some graphics ready on your end. Teams that we expect to be the best in 2021, starting with the Eastern Conference. So, Ben, what we've got here, right, is an aggregate of the Eastern Conference from our selections that we picked earlier, right?
Right, yeah.
All right, let's take it from the top. Does anyone here not have Columbus Crew winning the Eastern Conference?
No.
Everybody did, right? Exactly. I think they're the best team in the league by far. Ben, do you think there's any team who can put up a reasonable fight in the Eastern Conference?
I mean, if a team like Atlanta gets hot, I think we've seen it from them in the past, but Columbus was the best team in the league last year, and then they went out and signed players and got better. And I don't see how they can. It feels like the road to MLS Cup runs through Columbus right now.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, they go out and sign a guy like Kevin Molino, who's now out for 6 to 8 weeks. But like, that's not that. He was just an added bonus to this team. So I mean, they went out and got better and deeper and stronger and didn't lose a single player. So that says a lot about this Crew team.
Right. I mean, like, he was a borderline MVP candidate last year, and missing him for 6 weeks. I mean, it's a bummer, but it doesn't feel like the end of anything for Columbus.
Philadelphia Union, I think we all rank them pretty high. My question for you guys is do they replace Aronson just like that? Like, is it a thing that they're going to struggle to recreate, or is it this team is just set up strong enough that they're not going to miss one player enough to keep them from finishing that high?
Have you seen Paxton Aronson? I mean, that kid, I mean, he's. I'm not saying that he's going to come in this year and do what his older brother did.
Yeah, he was filthy in that preseason game a week or two ago.
That kid is really, really good, and a lot of people around in the Philly organization think he's going to be even better than his brother. I think the biggest miss is not even necessarily Aronson. It's going to be missing Mark McKenzie along that back line and his leadership and what he brings to that team. They still have a very strong core group of guys like Andrew Blake at goalkeeper, but I think with Philadelphia, as with a lot of teams, because they're gonna miss Blake with the Gold Cup, but it's just gonna be international duty as well, which is something we didn't have to think about last year.
And there's something to be said for the benefit of having the CONCACAF Champions League going right into the MLS season. Who does Union even start with in the first of the regular season? Columbus. So right there is the matchup you would want in the Eastern Conference right out the gate. And Union's already got the CONCACAF Champions League under their belt.
Especially when preseason has been so hit or miss for a lot of teams. They've been playing meaningful games for a while. So you have to think that they'll kind of hit their form earlier than a lot of other teams.
Atlanta United, look, you guys put them in fourth. I think I was the shyest on them. I had a little bit lower than you guys. And is this just all predicated on the idea that Josef comes back and saves the day?
I mean, I think Atlanta is still they have a really talented roster. And I think it kind of speaks to just how terrible Frank de Boer was to take what should have been a really exciting attacking team and kind of just break it.
Well, we're seeing the proof of that with the Netherlands on an international break basis as well. So
I mean, and you saw it before he came to Atlanta, so I'm not sure why it was a surprise to a ton of people. But I mean, they still have talent on the roster. The manager kind of just has to get out of the way and let his players play. And I think Gabriel Heinze is a pretty exciting manager coming out of Argentina. I mean, kind of touted as one of the next big things. So, I mean, I think if he does a semi-decent job, they have the players to be one of the best teams in the league. I mean, not just Josef. They have plenty of good attacking players there already. They've made some really interesting signings. I think last year was kind of just an aberration.
Yeah, and they added guys like Alan Franco and then Jurgen Damm for the whole season. I think they're primed to hit the ground running.
Andy, as we talk about the top of the conferences, flip over to the Western Conference for me. My man. Western Conference, looking around near the top. Guys, all of us are high on Minnesota United. I think they've made good signings. I think we've seen a good ascension. And credit to them, right? They come in, they had a pretty rough expansion season. And then I think the very next year they reset the record for goals shipped in, correct? Am I remembering that right? They had the worst defense ever 2 years in a row?
Yes, they did.
Okay, I thought so. And this,
but those were quickly
broken. Passed by FC Cincinnati.
Quickly broken.
Right. So, but credit to them. That's how you build a franchise. They had a plan. They came in. They stuck to that plan and have continued to get better and better. And I think if you're a Nashville SC fan, seeing the sustained success that they've been able to put together after that start, this is what you want to see in 3, 4, 5 years. Is people talking about Nashville SC being in contention for the best record in the Eastern Conference. Minnesota United at the top. LAFC we've got there as well. Portland Timbers, Sporting Kansas City. Any shakeup you guys see here? Anybody have a really strong opinion of cracking
I was
that top
probably
four?
I was probably the lowest on Minnesota United. I think that losing Kevin Molino last year is going to be a huge thing. It's going to be a question of Reynoso is going to be able to provide those assists, but who's going to be able to put those goals in? They did sign Roman Nabila from Argentina, so the expectation is that he's the one that puts in the goals, but that's probably the one that I'm maybe the lowest on of, where we kind of put everything together, and then how does Seattle cope without Jordan Morris?
I think that could turn into...
Go ahead, Lucas.
I was going to say, I think that could turn into one of the most exciting duos in the conference coming up. That's two Boca Juniors products right there, right? And Abia and Bebelo for Minnesota United. I think that partnership could be explosive.
I think Portland's going to be a really interesting team. I still think they're maybe the best team in the league just when they go out on the counter. They have Sebastian Blanco coming back after he tore his ACL in the MLS's back tournament. And And I think they're a really interesting team from a U.S. perspective because Jeremy Ebobisse he's always performed, and he's, for whatever reason, he's just never been given a fair shake at the number 9 position for his club team or for the national team. I'm hoping that this is the year that he kind of gets to really have a shot at the number 9 role, because I think I think if he gets a consistent job there, he'll bang in some goals. But I think they're just a really interesting team. They're really deep, and they're fun to watch. So I'm excited to watch them this year.
So real quick, I just want to shout out 2 ideas. A team that we think is going to surprise people and be better than they were last year, and a team that's going to struggle. And I just want to stick for one team on each one. I'll lead off because I know we've kind of got some consensus here. I think Chicago in the Eastern Conference is set up to surprise. Ben, we've talked about this a lot. I think last year they were consistently, over the 2 or 3 times that we played them, just visually the hardest team for Nashville SC to break down. They control the ball well. They've got some talent on the roster. It's going to take putting the pieces together. I've got them in the playoffs. I think they're a really, really sound side.
I think they play some of the most attractive soccer in MLS, and they also make some of the just most mind-blowingly terrible mistakes in MLS. I mean, it was 100% on them that they were not a playoff team last year. If they can clean up those mistakes, especially just from their center backs and from their midfield, I think they could be one of the more exciting teams to watch. And selfishly, I just want to see them in the playoffs because I enjoy watching them probably as much or more than any other team in the league right now.
Slate, somebody you're expecting to struggle.
DC United. I mean, I think they could easily be I think DC United. They're not in a good shape. They're missing some guys. It's going to be a question to see what Hernan Losada brings to this team for a new coach in MLS. But I mean, I think that we could have a situation. He does play a very up tempo attacking brand of soccer. So we could have a San Jose type team in the East that is a lot of fun, but gives up a lot of goals.
I think DC deserves to struggle until ownership gives the fan base what they want in the cherry blossom jerseys. And until then, they just deserve to just rot in mediocrity. But
bunch of cowards.
Being a DC guy, the cherry blossom jerseys need to happen. All right, guys, real quick. I think we got about 4 minutes left before we hop over to our interview with Tom Bogert of MLSsoccer.com. And so real quick, rapid fire, let's get through it. Who do we have going down, starting with, we'll do Ben, Slape, Lucas, and then myself. Who do we have as league MVP?
I think it's going to be Carlos Vela. I think he's finally going to get to play on the wing instead of kind of filling in as a false 9. And I mean, he's just proven to be the best player in MLS when he's healthy, and he's not going to miss any time on international duty.
I'm going to go.
Go ahead, Slape. Sorry.
Lucas Zelarayan.
Any reasoning you've got there?
I'm going to go Josef Martinez.
Josef Martinez. There we go. I'm going to go with Ladero, and I don't know. It's just a feeling there. I kind of wanted to mix in somebody different from the rest of the group. I think the Seattle's going to be better, and I think with Jordan Morris down, they're going to need more contributions across the board. So that's what I'm going with. I think Vela is probably my gut as well. I just wanted to mix it up there. I've got Vela down as the Golden Boot, and I think we're going to touch on that here in just a second. The Golden Boot, that's my answer. Anybody have anybody different than Vela there? It sounds like you've got Josef, Lucas, if you're picking him as the MVP.
Well, anytime Josef has been available in MLS, has he not just scored at an absurd rate? You know, I feel like he will come back. He's had plenty of time to come back from that injury that at this point is well over a year that he went down with that in late February in Nissan Stadium. I think he comes back. I think he storms back into MLS this season.
Yeah, I had the same one, but I will say one last thing on the MVP. It's crazy that none of us even mentioned last year's reigning MVP and Andre Pozuelo.
Well, I think we all just are low on Toronto, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think Josef Martinez. The big thing when I was looking at Golden Boot winners, who's not going to miss the most time? I mean, is Martinez playing with Venezuela, but if he's not, I think he will run away with the Golden Boot.
Ben, you have Vela for the Golden Boot.
Yeah, I have him for a Golden Boot and for MVP.
There you go. I think that's sound. I've got him for the Golden Boot. And And then I think a thing that we've got to touch on here, right, is the idea that if Atlanta is going to be as good as some of us think they're going to be, a lot of that's going to fall on the shoulders of Josef Martinez. And so if he gets out of the ground hot, if he stays healthy, that's going to be the story of the season for Atlanta United. MLS Cup or Supporter Shield winners. I think we all have Columbus doing the double, right? Is anybody beef with that?
No, I have Philly winning the cup this
Philly
year.
winning the cup, okay.
But I think that
Columbus winning the Supporter Shield.
Yeah.
I have Portland winning MLS Cup.
There you go. I got Columbus doing the double. I don't see anybody beating them, man. I think they're going to go coast to coast.
When's the last time a Supporter Shield team won MLS Cup?
When's the last time you think a team was as good comparatively to the rest of the league as this Columbus team?
LAFC 2 years ago.
LAFC 2 years, yeah.
No, dude, come on, man. That you've got to be able to do something in the playoffs to be the God-given, absolutely are going to win the league team.
But they were the best regular season
Doesn't
team
matter.
in MLS history.
And then what do they do in the playoffs?
Right, but I'm saying going into okay. We don't have time to do this. Andy, thank you for reminding us.
Andy's
I
yelling
will
at us.
defend this.
For the chat, he said.
I will die on
Andy's
this hill
yelling at us.
later.
That's fine. You can die. Die is what you will do on that hill. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back with an interview with Tom Bogert. Really, you're going to enjoy that. It's more than just me yelling about stuff. You'll enjoy the talk with Tom, a guy bringing national perspective to talk about the league as a whole and some insights on Nashville Soccer Club as well. Stay tuned for that. We'll be back afterwards for Nashville Soccer specific predictions going into the season. If you've got questions, throw them in Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're at. We'll get to them when we come back after the interview. We'll be right back. This is Speedway Soccer. Hey, everybody. Welcome into the Speedway Soccer MLS season preview episode. I'm sitting here with Ben Wright, as always, and we are thrilled tonight to bring in Tom Bogert. Tom covers nationally MLS as a league. We consider him much smarter than us as league as a whole. Maybe not, probably smarter than me about Nashville SC, but not smarter than Ben is the argument I would probably make. Tom, thanks so much for being here, bro.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me. If you guys think that using the word smart around me, we have different definitions for the word smart. As you can tell by me getting on off there on that joke. So.
Well, Tom, look, let's get it kicked off with this. You were the guy, I think it was you. You selected Nashville to finish fourth in the standings this season, which is a considerable amount higher than a lot of your colleagues over at MLSsoccer.com. How good do you think this team can actually be? Eastern Conference, in my opinion, is going to be pretty tough this year. So I would say saying they're going to be fourth in the East is pretty solid. You think they're a pretty good club, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I was higher on them than the rest of, I guess, my colleagues that were in on those predictions. And I'll hedge this right away by saying that I think predictions are just silly. And there's borderline no way. So let's say even if I am right that they finished exactly fourth, I'm sure that the route that they're going to take to get there isn't going to be the way that I had it laid out in my head. So I'll just hedge everything I say with that because I don't want to be held up for if I get something right versus the million things I get wrong. But yeah, I mean, I'm just generally high in this team. They have all of kind of the characteristics that would lead to success. You saw the historic defense for an expansion team last year, which is it's insanely hard to do. I don't think that that's even being talked about enough. Oddly enough, because again, that was the kind of the first thing that people talk about when they talk about Nashville is how stout that defense was. I mean, it's unrealistic to expect them to concede less than a goal a game over the course of a 34-game season, but I don't think that they vastly overperformed, and that's even looking at and I know that the advanced metrics, wouldn't have expected them to concede, that few, and that kind of evens out a little bit over a season. But I think that the attack is going to be much more improved in a year-over-year basis. But I don't look at it as a full year in the attack, because that comes with cohesion, and again, that's an expansion season. But also, Yannick Cadiz didn't start a regular season game, and Wallabwana didn't start a regular season game. Hani Mukhtar was out for a while. Randall Leal only really hit his stride towards the end of the season. And I think that those are just there's so much more room for improvement and upside. And I think that their floor is really high just because of that defensive unit.
Yeah, so this actually kind of leads into my question pretty well. I think with Gary Smith teams in USL, we saw that the defense is that level that you're going to get is pretty consistent. And so I think the defense that we saw last year should be the defense that we see again in 2021. But down the stretch, that attack was, really good, up there with the best in MLS. Do you think that's sustainable, or do you think it'll be kind of a somewhere in between what we saw the first, 2/3 of the season and then that last stretch?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, obviously, as optimistic as I am on this team, I'm not even sure that Gary Smith would call it the best attack in MLS or one of the best. I think that they're going to be solid at the very worst, a solid attack. But that might be saying too much to expect them to kind of be performing at the same level as their defense when it comes to the rest of the league. So I think that it's going to be a more balanced approach. It'll be led primarily defensively because, like you said, these are Gary Smith teams, and looking at the players and everybody on roster. But again, I think the attack is going to be solid. I don't think that it's going to mirror 2019 LAFC, but I don't think that they're going to struggle that much with scoring goals. There will be the 0-0 draws or the 1-1 draws that, leave fans frustrated, but hey, that happens over a 34-game season. And I just really, really like the upside and the potential and the fit that some of these players have. I was really encouraged by, the small sample size of, Yana Cadiz, Alex Muyo, Hani Mukhtar, and Randall Leal. And now you add in, Rodrigo Pinheiro and CJ Sapong potentially off the bench. And I just think that there's a lot of different variations that this attack can show, and I think that the upside kind of outweighs the question marks.
Tom, I used to coach football, and my brother's a defensive coordinator, and so a big saying back home is it's not X's and O's, it's Johnny and Joe's. Where do you think this team is going to have an issue, as far as a unit goes? I think we all would agree the defense as a unit's pretty good. You've got defending MLS of the year Walker Zimmerman. You've got a guy like Alistair Johnson who just starting to get caps for the Canadian national team. The defense we think is solid. You think the aging midfield is maybe an issue, or would you say it's that forward group as a whole that is maybe lacking when it comes to keeping them from being in that upper echelon of a club?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. You raise good points, say, when it comes to Dax and Anibal Nabil kind of getting there a little bit in age. The counter argument there would be is Dax is kind of, I think, in the Diego Chara mode, or a mold where one, he takes care of his body incredibly well, and he hasn't showed signs of slowing down really. But it'll happen eventually, and I'm sure that they'll manage his minutes a little bit more this year even. And Godoy has had his nagging injuries, like that'll be something that just kind of happens during the year. But Anunga is a solid, third choice. Maybe with the trade of Derek Jones, they could use another guy in that midfield group. So, if you had to kind of press me to it, I'd probably say there, just because I think that Daniel Rios is an overqualified backup in MLS. I think that it's, super disappointing that he didn't get a real run of games early in the season last year. And I know that there was a couple games where when Yana Cadiz was still getting kind of blooded into the team, that when Rios was unavailable, that Derek Jones has started as a false nine and such, that I wish that Rios could have really just had kind of a consistent run of games, because I think that he's going to be a really good backup, I guess, for this team. I look at him in the same mold as Brian White. Like, he's a guy in the Red Bulls I like a lot. He's not a huge name. You see he has a good record in USL, but maybe he's not, like you said, the guy that you're looking at, like your DP, like Cadiz. I think that there are plenty of options in that attack, and particularly if you're playing with just one up top, that you would hope that between those two and CJ Sapong that they'll have it covered. But yeah, I guess if you had to press me on it, I'd say a lack of numbers in central midfield behind Dax and Anibal.
Yeah, that forward rotation I think is probably going to be the biggest, not position battle, but it's going to be the most interesting position group to watch, because especially if Cadiz misses time this summer with Venezuela, then you're going to have really a battle, I think, between Rios and Sapong, and then even factoring a guy like Baji, who was first choice last year. They have options. How do you see that playing out? And do you think one of those guys is going to come in and just win the starting job, or do you think it's going to be kind of a forward by committee?
Are you saying, is this including Cadiz, or are you saying when Cadiz is unavaiable, say with the
including Cadiz? I don't think, if he's not scoring goals every week, I don't think Gary's going to be afraid to try something else.
I'm with you there, but I think he's going to have a super long leash. And again, he kind of passed my eye test in limited games. I think that he's, easily the unquestioned starter. Things change, obviously, if you go on an ice cold drought. But I think that we're far, far away from having any discussions about who should be the starter. I guess when Cadiz is gone, and And I think Smith will be smart. He's not silly enough to think that Cadiz is going to play 34 games, or you can kind of even just rely on that. I think that we'll see some 3-5-2. Maybe it'll look more like 3-4-2-1, but I think that there's the potential for some two-striker formations here and there. So I think that all of those guys are going to be very important. And again, CJ Sapong too. I'm really curious to see how his role kind of plays out. Is he going to be late career Alan Gordon, where he's just coming off the bench in almost all of his appearances, and he's somebody that either you're chasing a game, you want to change things up, get an aerial threat on the field, or is he actually going to be more of a rotational piece that gets a couple starts at forward and left wing? And so I'm very interested to see how they kind of treat his role and I guess his expectations are, because I'm sure this is the kind of thing that would have came up when he signed his free agent deal, as what the expectations were for him.
You've touched on it a bit, Yonder Cadiz and Hani Mukhtar as well. You mentioned earlier. What do you think the ceiling is like for those two guys in this league? Maybe particularly start with Hani. How high can he go? Does he got the tools in the bag to be a best 11 type guy, or just a pretty good playmaker, good conference player in the East, something like that?
I don't like putting ceilings on guys, because anybody could kind of go out there and get hot. It would be, I think, too much to realistically expect a best 11 caliber season. Now, perhaps he gets hot, he takes set pieces and all these things, and that adds up numbers. And if your team's doing well, you're going to get looks for that. But I think a reasonable expectation is that he'll just give, bar none, kind of just DP quality. He's going to be somebody, hopefully, who contributes, I don't know what the benchmark would have to be, 8 or 10 goals and 8 or 10 assists. As long as he's hovering around that double-double mark to take a basketball term into Major League Soccer, just kind of hovering around. If he can flirt with 10 and 10, I think that would be a success for him, and I think he's capable of that. This is one of the disagreements that me and my good pal and Matt Doyle will have, is that he cites kind of the underlying numbers that he doesn't think that they love Hani, and he's kind of not sure, but I don't know. I think that everything that the context that played in that last season, again, not playing most of the entire season without a start from a DP center forward, playing in an expansion season that got impacted by a pandemic. I think that, that there's just a lot of context that could be applied. And again, he could be right. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overvaluing this, or maybe I'm making too many excuses, being too optimistic. But, I think that, a realistic expectation for Hani is to, be secondary type scorer, and also, put in, can flirt with 10 and 10.
I think similar to that, we're all interested to see how Rodrigo Pinheiro adapts. And it seems, they've played 2 preseason games. We haven't seen either of them, and info about them has been pretty limited. But it seems so far that both Handwala Bwana and Alex Mule have been preferred so far over him. And I think a lot of that just comes down to adapting to a new league and all that. But what are you hoping to see from him this season? And what do you kind of consider to be a successful season for a guy like that?
I'm honestly not sure, because like you said, it's par for the course around MLS in preseason that some teams are starting lineups with like their national security. Some teams can't find a stream, you can barely find highlights. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and pretend that I was watching the Uruguayan top flight. I've talked to people about Pinheiro. He looks at talent. He's got great pedigree, being a Uruguay youth international, spent some time at the same club that produced Diego Rossi and Brian Rodriguez. And, he was somewhere, I forget off the top of my head what transfer fees are reported, something around $3 million, give or take. So, that's a significant outlay for kind of a player of his age and pedigree. But I really don't know what a good season would be. I guess you would have to see flashes. Like you said, I believe that Muyl is going to definitely be preferred to him, and probably Bwana too. I think that he'll get his chance, given that what the team invested in him with allocation money in the trade from Seattle. So, I don't know, because what happens if Muyl and Bwana are proving, very, very capable, and it's going to be hard to take them out of the lineup. Would you call Jack Mayer's rookie season, like a disappointment or a failure? Like, I'm not sure I would either. I would rather, I don't want to speak for you guys. I'm not sure I would, just because he didn't get in the team, because Walker Zimmerman and Dave Romney can't drop either one of those. So I have no idea when it comes to expectations. This is a terrible answer, and it's a terrible take, but I think that it's just going to be really difficult to grade, and that'll be something that you have to, do on a grading curve, because if he comes in and after a little while, if he's still struggling to adapt to MLS, and you start to fear that maybe he's more of the Thomas Konechny or Santiago Mosquera, or any of, the high potential South American imports that have come to MLS and kind of haven't made it, and you start to kind of get scared. But, I wouldn't heap too much pressure on him or too much expectation. Probably too early in the year.
You brought up Jack Mayer, and that's been a big topic in the Nashville subreddits and Twitter lately. Is how wrong did Nashville and Mike Jacobs get it by not selecting Daryl Dike and taking Jack Mayer instead? And we've kind of walked this line in our show of, hey, look, we didn't know that Walker Zimmerman was coming in at the club. We had no idea. And when you take that context, taking what looks like a surefire MLS starter made a lot of sense. That being said, I think that position gets harder and harder to reason with every goal Daryl Dike scores at the championship. What's your thought on those two and where the clubs went? Miami passed on the guy twice. It should be mentioned as well.
Yeah, I think that's Nashville's best point is that, first of all, that Mayer's looking fine, and they didn't take a different forward, and they didn't pass on him twice. So I think that they've benefited from Miami kind of getting the brunt of this criticism. And look, he wasn't a consensus top pick. I would have taken him top. That was just kind of my feeling, but I'm not a scout. I wasn't watching a ton of college soccer anyway, so that was just me looking at him like, Jesus, this dude looks incredible. And if he's this, physically dominant and this kind of good with his feet in moments, what could this dude's ceiling be? But there was plenty of people who, obviously rated Robbie Robinson ahead of him, and those would be people in the Miami front office. And I don't know, where Nashville would have stood on that if they were going to take a forward, if it'd be one of those two. But, they had Jack Mayer at the top of their board, by the summer. He was kind of clearly like, hey, this is kind of our guy. And yeah, it's not great, but that it doesn't mean that there's he's not, I don't think, ever going to be a $20 million player like Daryl Dike is. So I think that's pretty clear because center backs don't generate that kind of value. But I'd stop short at it being a big failure or whatever kind of word you want to throw in there. But yeah, it's kind of looking pretty clear a year later who the top prospect ended up being.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it we won't know for another couple of years because Mayer seems just more like a long-term option. And if he ends up being a long-term starter after Romney or Zimmerman or whoever is gone, I think it's a different question entirely. But looking back at
one more there.
Yeah,
I think that you're going to see Gary Smith do a lot of 3 center back formations. I kind of alluded to it before. I think that's something that you guys would know better than me. He did a decent amount in the USL Championship, and I think with the club are really high on Mayer. And again, maybe they were doing the Inter Miami thing where Neville was talking a lot about Robbie Robinson after Daryl Dike scored goal. They were starting to get more and more criticism when that happens, but. I do think that he's primed to get, more starts and appearances than you might assume with, a back line that's so formed and a center back partnership that's pretty unbreakable barring injury.
I tweeted it the other day. I think the ideal Gary Smith formation is 10 center backs and then Alex Moyle starting at the 9. So I think you're dead on about potentially seeing 3 center backs a decent amount this year.
I mean, it mirrors pretty well what we saw in USL too. It was pretty much a 4-2-3-1 for the first season, and then when they added some more attacking pieces and you get more options to go to up top, he went to a back 3. So yeah, I think we'll definitely see it a lot this year. I mean, looking back at the 2019 standings, which feels like 5 years ago, 7th place was right around 45 points. New England got 7th place and 45 points. If you extrapolate Nashville's performance last season over 34 games, they're right around 47 points. If you had to bet in 2021, are you taking the over or the under on Nashville pulling in 47 points?
Well, I'll be consistent with my nonsense prediction, so I have to go over. I've already paid them SF points. I don't think that you're finishing 4th or 5th wherever I had them if you're going under there. But yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of movement between I like to look at it as tiers when I'm forced to do predictions. There's I think right now it's Columbus, and then there's a bunch of a lot of different teams I could see finishing between 2 and 7, honestly. And I think that speaks to the the strong nature of the Eastern Conference and just how tight some of these are going to be. I don't know if you still have the 2019 standings up in front of you, but it's wild that 3 to 5 points can be the difference between X amount of spots in MLS. And when you can look back at any one moment, the penalty you thought you should have had, or the mistake that you never thought would have happened, or vice versa, or the late goal that you never thought you were going to get, that kind of changes on game to game basis. And you look back at just 1 or 2 of those, and that's the difference between say 3rd and 6th.
Yeah, 5 points between 7th and 4th back in 2019.
Tom, who's a club you think is going to struggle in the Eastern Conference this year, kind of versus last year?
When you said struggle, I was already starting to think, okay, who am I going to say here, DC United or FC Cincinnati? I keep going back and forth on the Red Bulls because they didn't bring in, anybody of note or of pedigree this winter, but like you've seen Philly and the Red Bulls as well in recent years take unheralded signings and then just maximize it and be greater than the sum of their parts. So the Red Bulls, I guess, just strictly speaking, when it comes to, playoff teams from last year is kind of at the top of, somebody who would probably drop off is what they finished 6th, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't see, the likes of Columbus and Philly and New England and Atlanta, obviously we're well below that, but some of these clubs I think that are going to jump up, and you look at Atlanta, I think that you write them in pen as a playoff team this year, and that takes away, one of the top 7 or whatever that made the playoffs last year. Or I guess Montreal technically was a playoff team last year, and I think that they're not, going to be very not good. I don't think they were particularly good last year either, and benefited from, an expanded playoffs and winning some points early that, they didn't thoroughly deserve on the run of the 90 minutes. Montreal, I guess, would be a bigger one because they did make the playoffs too, technically.
We've all somehow ended up being pretty high on Chicago here, and I couldn't tell you why, other than I just enjoy watching them. Do you think they're?
Vicky has your hair and you have his, and you think by defense you're your very own essence.
Exactly. Yeah, it became personal somehow. No, but do you think they could be a playoff team this year, or do you think it's going to be with how much so many other teams like Atlanta have improved? I mean, even Cincinnati, we'll see if they've actually improved, but just it feels like the East as a whole has gotten better this year. Do you think Chicago has done enough to be able to hang with that, or do you think they're going to kind of be the same team that we saw last year?
I think it'll be a little bit of both. I think that they'll be the same in that there are going to be games that they dominate or that they look really good, or you could take a 5-minute highlight clip and be like, wow, like Chicago was awesome that game. And then you kind of look at the standings and you think, hey, where did they drop points? How did this happen? And then it'll be just, an inexplicable mistake from an individual defender or a goalkeeper or a center mid, what have you. So I don't know. I think that they're going to be fine. I do like Vicky a lot. And there are a number of players on that team that I quite enjoy and think that are good MLSers, particularly Bogert and Gaston Jimenez and Mauricio Pineda. But I don't know. Like you said, when you look at some of the other MLS teams, I think Atlanta are an exception based on how much they improved because there aren't a lot of teams around that what they finished 11th or something, 11th or 12th. There aren't a lot of teams that can have we finished 12th, but that's partly because we had the worst possible coach for our culture and style, and oh, by the way, the best goal scorer in the league and one of the best in league history was out for the entire season. So I think that you kind of throw them out, but yeah, to your larger point, I'm not sure that they improved enough year over year to kind of make up that gap, and while watching all these other teams improve.
Has Cincinnati done enough to climb out of the wooden spoon contention slots?
I think that it won't be a foregone conclusion like it kind of has been the last 2 years. So, kudos to them for that. I don't know. I'm usually optimistic when it comes to these things. You can talk yourself into lineups and rosters and talent on paper. You go, if this, if that, and why not be optimistic and see it? And you can see that path of this team. But then I start to think about last year when I was like, oh, like Cincinnati made a couple good, nice new signings, and you touched the hot stove and you got burned while they spent, they had a purchase option for Jurgen Locadia for $10 million. We were talking about him as a best 11 caliber player, and I still can't believe that he was what he was in MLS last year, just with all the talent he has and the age he has and the desire he has to remain here. Yu Akubo was pretty terrible too. CM De Jong literally couldn't have been worse by way of goal contributions. So I think that some of these will work out. And then I also thought that last year, so now I'm kind of scared to say it again. And particularly with Frankie Amaya going, I don't know what they're going to do by way of defending in central midfield, because you can talk me into him as 8 and, the more defensive-minded presence behind him. But if you're starting duo of Medunjanin and Acosta in a central midfield trio, you're just going to get run through.
Tom Bogert has been the guest. Tom, we're greatly appreciative, man. Thanks for coming on. Plug real quick where they can find you on socials and they can find your writing.
Just on Twitter at Tom Bogert, and then anywhere at the great MLSsoccer.com.
We are super appreciative of it, man. We're going to get right back to our preseason predictions for the MLS season on Speedway Soccer. Thanks for hanging. Welcome back after somewhat of a delay there. Modern technology. Is everybody here? I don't see Ben. I see Slate. Lucas, are you in the house? We got no Lucas. We're going to keep it rolling, okay? We'll keep this rolling. Lucas, there he is. There's my guy. Ben is back as well. Sorry about the difficulties there, guys. First time dropping in an interview on an episode, so we're still learning this. Shout out Broadway Sports Media for getting the restream running for us. And shout out Andy as well for just producing a masterpiece over there right now. He's pitching a no-hitter on his very first time through as the producer. We appreciate it. Guys, Tom there, a lot of insight, really, really good look at the league. Always good to get an outside perspective on the club as well. So I enjoyed his thoughts on the team. And, I think he kind of shared a lot of the things that we had talked about in the chat, getting ready for this episode. So let's just get right into it, all right? Talk through Nashville Soccer Club, what we expect for this team. And, Ben, I think we kind of tossed Tom a little bit of a softball there on 47.5. So why don't we make it a little bit more interesting, right? 50.5 points. Where do we fall over under for Nashville Soccer Club heading into the 2021 season?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the 2020 season, 2019 season, which was the last time they played a full 30. Probably a more reasonable over under than what we had pitched to Tom.
So taking those figures, Slape, let's start with you. Where do you find Nashville Soccer Club on 50.5 points?
I'm taking the slight under. I think there's a chance that Nashville could get to a point where they have good results but don't finish as high. I think the international schedule for this team with guys missing for Gold Cup will make it a little difficult to hit those heights. I mean, I know that every team is going to deal with that, but when you look at Nashville sneakily has a decent number of people who could be missing for international duty. So I'm going with the under.
Lucas, your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Slape's reasoning here. I mean, look, there should be no expectation but for Nashville SC to improve, right? For the output overall to be better. But I do think that the losing guys to international duty is going to come into effect. We talked last week about that back line and what happens when Walker Zimmerman is with the U.S. men's national team and Alistair Johnson's with Canada. And we didn't have a great answer in terms of just picking up that slack and there being no drop off. So I do worry about that in stretches. I got a slight under, but I think 50 is a great target number, and I think they'll be right around that mark.
Ben, go ahead and your little bit. The only thing I'll add there to Lucas's statement is that we have made a trade for Dylan Nealis, which should be somewhat of a spell when Alistair Johnson isn't with the club. So that should strengthen us defensively when that happens. I'm
gonna take the over. I think with the caveat that I don't think 50 points in 2021 is going to be quite the same as it was in 2019, because I think the top teams in the East are a lot better than they were back in 2019, and I just think there's going to be a bigger split between the kind of the top third of the table and the bottom third. So I think the top teams are just going to have more opportunities to pick up points. But yeah, I mean, I think I'll just bank on Nashville's defense to pick up points even throughout the international windows. I think it'll get them. We saw last year it got them through stretches where they weren't scoring. And I just think with the defense that's going to be this good, even with a guy like Walker Zimmerman missing, I just think they have the personnel and the coaching staff in place to make up for it. So yeah, I'm gonna take the over.
I like the over too. I've got us finishing fourth and in a home playoff position. Look, I just think the club's really, really solid, and I think we are going to improve offensively in regards to last year. And I think when you look at it in that way, if you can just kind of keep close to what the defense did last year, which I absolutely do, that's going to be my take as well. I'm going to take the over on 50.5. Fourth place for Nashville SC. Bold prediction time, guys. We like doing this. We've done this kind of stuff for a long time now. And Ben, we'll start with you. What is your bold prediction for Nashville Soccer Club in 2021?
Yeah, I think that Nashville is going to have the best defense in MLS, and they're going to have a top 5 goal difference in MLS, which top 5 is probably a stretch, but what the heck, we're supposed to go bold. So, yeah, there it is for you.
I like it. Lucas, your bold prediction.
I think Rodrigo Pinheiro is in the starting lineup consistently before the midway point of the season. I really worry about winger depth this year. That's probably my number one concern with Nashville SC going into this season. I love Alex Moyle. If he and Randall Leal can stay healthy, that is a great starting point. But I think this team has to have a more dynamic option at some point, with Moyle being more of a go-to guy off the bench. You can only hope Pinheiro will provide that option. But if you want a bold prediction, that's what it is from me.
Slate.
So my bold prediction, it plays in a little bit to my reason I took the under. My bold prediction is that Nashville SC will win U.S. Open Cup.
Look, I like it, and we've talked a little bit about this. We brought up the idea last week on, would you take winning that versus missing the playoffs? And I think winning Open Cup is a huge accomplishment. We say it all the time, winning begets winning. You just got to go out and win something. And Slate brings up a great point in the chat here. Would you guys agree that for this club, with the schedule we have at the start of the season and kind of some low-hanging fruit as far as the full picture of the schedule, would you say that failing to make the Open Cup as one of the top 8 teams in MLS would be a failure for Nashville Soccer Club?
Yes.
I know I'm the one that posed the question, but I would say yes, for all the reasons you listed.
Lucas?
Yeah, certainly. And to your point about, I think we all agreed here, right, that you would rather win the Open Cup than just make the playoffs. I mean, that's like saying, would you rather get into Europe or win the FA Cup for a lot of Premier League clubs? And I think a lot of clubs would go with the FA Cup. I think it's kind of in that same. Well, it depends who you're talking about. But maybe that's a bad comparison. But either way, I think we're all in agreement.
I think for a lot of clubs, they would rather win the FA Cup.
Yeah,
if there's 3 or 4 teams who are outside of the top 4 who you're thinking, oh no, we need to get to Europe so we can spin people. But the other 13 or 14 teams can't spend any money anyway, so they just want to win the trophy, right?
Plus, how many Premier League clubs right now are at a point where the expectation is to win Champions League? Like, I'm sorry, but I don't know that that's a realistic thing.
I'm with Lucas on that. Okay, my bold prediction for the club. This is kind of club focus. It's not league focus like yours have been. I got Hani Mukhtar going down as the leading goal scorer and leading assist maker for the team. I think he's set for a great season. I asked Tom, I don't know that I'm saying he's going to be an MLS 11 guy. I think he's going to be really, really good this year. I think he's got the skill set, and I think he's going to fit into this club really, really well this season. Guys, any questions for me on the Hani one there? We've talked about it a bit, but
where do you think he's going to stack up with the rest of the league, not just in Nashville? Do you think he's going to be like an MLS best 11 caliber player?
No. That's what I'm saying. I don't think he is going to be MLS best 11. But I think he's going to be in the conversation for it. I think he'd be one of 3 or 4 guys who maybe miss out that you think, hey, you know what? They had a shout to be in there.
Okay, that's
like
bold.
I think if he goes like 12 and 10 or 13 or 14 and 11 or 12, I think he's going to be right there for it.
I mean, I think if he's playing like you did down the stretch last year in the last 7-8 games, I think for sure he has the talent. I just worry about health.
I would also say, like, as far as like best 11, I just think he's in a position where it's fairly deep in the league. Those guys that you're scoring playmakers. I mean, you probably have to go 6 or 7 before you even get to Hani being in the conversation.
I mean, MLSsoccer.com put out a really good piece recently just about how the 10 is still relevant in MLS when it really isn't in the rest of the league. I mean, so you have guys like, did Diego Valeri make the best 11 last year?
No, he didn't.
No, yeah, you have got like Valeri, Reynoso, Mazzella Rayon, those guys I think all missed out on the best 11 last year. Which is,
but Slade, to my point, one of them is going to make the list, right? And then one of them is going to make best 11. And then you're saying there's 5 or 6 guys that you would lump in before Hani. What I'm saying is I think he makes that lump into, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 instead of 7 or 8.
Gotcha.
Well, which I think it would be impressive for him coming out of the injury-plagued season he had last year.
No.
I think rhythm is going to help him this season. I think less games in a row is going to help him this season. I think he's going to be on the field more with more talented players around him.
I would agree with that.
To that point, I mean, is it fair to say we expect Hani Mukhtar to be the go-to penalty kick taker for Nashville SC this season?
I think so.
Yeah. I think you have to take that into consideration. If he can knock in some free kicks like we saw last year, once or twice, I think I remember the Houston Dynamo game off the top of my head. But I think if Nashville SC can get into the final third consistently and win some penalties, then I think that may automatically put him at least in the conversation.
All right, guys, from bold predictions, biggest strength of the season heading in, I think this one's going to be pretty straightforward. It's the defensive core, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's nothing else. To me, it's the best defense in the league with the best defender in the league. I think it's going to be straightforward.
Important don't see a significant drop-off from Joe Willis because I think he sort of blew away all of our expectations last season with how good he was consistently from start to finish. If we get that same Joe Willis this coming season, then absolutely the floor remains very high, in my opinion.
Honestly, Joe Willis could regress and still have a fantastic season.
That's a fact.
And that's fair.
He was so
good
fair. Last year, man. He was so good.
That's certainly fair. And
sorry, Lucas.
No, go ahead.
No. That's fine. I'm just steering it along. So we're going from biggest strength of the team to biggest concern, and I'll kick this one off again. For me, biggest concern is depth in central midfield. I'm really big on Anunga. I think he's a really, really good player. We're going to lose Anibal Godoy for some time. Dax is aging just like Anibal is. We saw injuries to Anibal last year anyways. That's my concern, depth at central midfield. I know there's a few other places we're worried about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna still stick on midfield. Just when you look at like you said, you have Godoy, you have McCarty, you have Anunga, and then after that, Matt LaGrassa. I mean, there is nobody. You don't have a guy like Derek Jones who's able and could drop further back. And I think probably I would have said right back was a concern, but with Dylan Nealis coming in, they really resolved that.
By the way, no knock on Matt LaGrassa there because he was outstanding in the minutes he got last year. No. It's just not a guy who you would expect to be the fourth guy in at central midfield.
It's just with Godoy and McCarty at such a high level.
Derek Jones leaving.
Yeah, Derek Jones leaving. There's not anybody there's not a lot of teams that are going to have someone that can come off the bench and match those two levels.
I mean, I would say even with Anunga, as good as he is defensively, you just lose unless he progresses, which I think he can. He's still young, but you just lose a lot going forward if McCarty and Godoy aren't starting. So he
just doesn't have the same toolbox that those two guys have.
Right. Yeah. So I just think at some point you have to maybe consider looking for someone who can be kind of a box to box guy and play some more aggressive forward passes, because if you lose both Godoy and McCarty at all, I think you're in trouble.
Chris Holt chimes in, no heir apparent to Dax Godoy. Hey, you're saying the same thing as us, bro. We agree completely. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably why, kind of a lot of people were wondering, could Nashville possibly be in on a Frankie Amaya, who we saw go to New York Red Bulls this week? And so it's one of those things that's going to be a dice roller going into the season. We know the club does have some GAM built up, so maybe we see something happen at some point in time. That being said, for now, it's those two. And we expect them to perform at a high level again. But again, the question is, when they're not in there, who takes over? The only other thing I would say is lack of a proven goal scorer. We've just talked about it. I think Hani's going to have a good year. But the truth is we need one of these center forwards to take off. And it remains to be seen who that's going to be. Tom mentioned that he thinks Yonder Cadiz passes the eye test. I tend to agree with that. We know I'm big on the eye test. We know that. I think he does a lot of things well. I think the team looks better when he's in the lineup. But at the end of the day, a goal scorer's got to score goals, and that's what we've got to see up top. Ben, I know you're high on Rios' chances heading into the season. What about CJ Sapong, though?
I mean, he's a proven MLS forward. He's scored goals everywhere he's gone. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a competition for minutes, but I think when he gets on the field, he's been effective everywhere he's gone. So I don't really see that changing here.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern about Sapong is coming off of an injury, being 32. Yes, he's scored goals everywhere he's been, but how much is he able to contribute right off the bat with just him coming back from an injury?
But the point with the lack of a proven goal scorer, I think you still have options, though. I mean, you still feel good about the options with Rios and Cadiz and now with Sapong. I'm going to reiterate that winger depth, I think, remains the biggest concern, because even with Godoy and McCarty as a pairing, one of those guys is out. You feel like there's not much drop-off there with Brian Anunga. We saw that so many times last season. How much drop-off is there if Randall Leal goes down or if Alex Moyle goes down, and you have an unproven new signee in Rodrigo Pinheiro that's still trying to get acclimated to the MLS, to living in the States and in Nashville? I think that's the bigger question mark right now, is winger depth. That's where my biggest concern lies.
I think that's a reasonable take, Lucas. I think if this team's going to be as good as we hope that they can be, they're going to have that top-end talent going forward. And you're right. If there's injuries on the wings, it could be an issue.
And we saw last year when Mukhtar was forced to play out on the wing. We all agree Nashville SC was not at its best when that was the case, and it kind of stretched NSC a little thin in terms of attacking midfield. So I worry about them being forced into that scenario a few times this season.
Agree completely. All right, guys, last two questions, and we're going to wrap this thing up. Can Nashville be a better team in 2021 and fail to get the results that they got in 2020? I'll start. I am a resounding yes on this one. I think this team had everything kind of break its way results-wise as the season kind of progressed. We went from kind of the worst start and not being able to be in MLS's back, and then things just went our way. We broke the right way. Other teams dropped points. Other teams picked up injuries. We eked out results. We did everything we had to do. I think this team could be a lot better talent and product-wise on the field and not get the results that they got last year.
Yeah, I think that, you look at even like we look at the end of the season, like that Orlando game that come from behind win, the results they got in the playoffs, you could easily see this team still make the playoffs, but then, drop out first round, but still have a great season of progression with scoring goals and being able to create more chances.
Real quick question from Chris Holt. Does Gary go to a 4-3-3 if a winger gets hurt? Ben, I'll let you field that. Maybe I won't.
I forgot to hit the unmute button because I'm an idiot. If a winger gets hurt, I think I don't see why you go 4-3-3, because it puts more emphasis on wingers to create chances, because you're basically cutting out the 10. I think if a winger gets hurt, he goes to a back five, because you have depth at wing back. You have Johnston and Nealis on the right. You have Washington,
you have a guy like Taylor Washington, right? Yep.
Lovitz, and Hines on the left. You can get those guys; they'll go up and down all day, and then you have depth at striker too, so you can get two guys on the field. And then, I mean, if one of the wingers who is still healthy is Leal, then you can just shift him centrally, and you have two options there at the 10 position. So I mean, I think that's the first option, and I think probably even with a healthy squad, I think we'll see. I mean, Tom alluded to it, and I think we saw it in USL in year 2. A back 3, a back 5, whatever you want to call it, just became a lot more prevalent. And with the center backs that they have too, I mean, if you're wanting to get Jack Mayer on the field and really work on his development, putting him in a back 3 is a great way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree. I think if you look at this, we talked a lot about forwards, and we haven't even mentioned the likes of Dambaji and Abu Danladi, who are also there available. So I think that, like you said, a 3-5-2, some kind of 3-back set, is exactly what this team goes to.
All right, guys, last question of the night. What is success for 2021 for Nashville Soccer Club? Lucas, I'll start with you.
I still think success is making the playoffs and winning one playoff game. Last year, we talked about being in the conversation, right, at the end of the season. I think at this point, you can – And a lot of things can happen. There can be untimely injuries. We don't know what this season holds, but I think being in the playoffs, anything short of that, for me, I will consider it a disappointment.
Slate.
I'm going to say qualifying for Open Cup and making the playoffs.
I like both of them. I think the pair is a very good set of results. Ben?
Yeah, I would say qualifying for the playoffs is like the baseline expectation. I think, like Lucas said last year, we talked about being in the conversation. I don't think that's good enough anymore because you really have to make the playoff to show that last year wasn't a fluke. And then I would say on top of that, just really putting to rest a lot of the scoring issues that they had last season, and building on what they did for the last eight or so games of the regular season. I think if you can develop a more consistent attack, it just sets them up really well long term. I think those two things you got to get them both.
Look, this might sound a little bit harsh, but I think the time for moral victories would be after the season. So for me, like, what does success look like? If I'm saying in my personal life, what is success? To me, success is improvement. And so if I think we're going to see improvement, to me, I think we've got to go up in the standings. I've got us in a home playoff spot. I think for me, like, getting a home playoff game is success. Probably just break even, getting to the playoffs is a success. But for me, I want to see the team get better. I want to see a home playoff game at Nissan Stadium. I agree with Slape. I think a run in the Open Cup is important. Just winning games, going rounds, proving that it's a viable product on the field, to me, is really, really important. And how you do that, to me, it's hosting a playoff game at home. I think it's really, really important. I know that's going to sound harsh to a lot of people. It kind of even sounds harsh coming out of my mouth, but we can kind of memorialize later and say, hey, you know what? This team got better, even though they didn't really surpass what they did last year.
Hell, they did that last year, technically.
They did. No, you're right. Yeah, they hosted the play-in game at home. But I think you get there and you get a real home playoff game. To me, that's like a big accomplishment, a big success. Is that too harsh? Am I being too hard on them?
I wouldn't say that.
And I think that way, too, you put to rest the argument that Nashville just qualified last year because it was a weird year.
Agreed completely.
Which, to be fair, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that thrown around much.
I haven't seen it from many national people either. I agree completely. Guys, we got another episode coming up later in the week. We're going to do a deep dive on Nashville SC's match against FC Cincinnati. Get into more personnel. Get into more FC Cincinnati specific talk, which we know Nashville Soccer Twitter loves to talk about. Looking forward to that.
Calendars.
Mark your calendars. We'll have that out at the end of the week. That's live Thursday night, right, guys?
Thursday night at 8:30.
Thursday night at 8:30. We'll be live covering that topic. Be there for that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're looking forward to it. Listen, it's going to be a long season. We're not going to have any blow-ups or anything like we did last year. We're going to kind of like stand firm in that idea that we're going to get through a normal season. We'll be here all the way with you. We're going to have multiple episodes out every week. Lucas, big question is Wednesday night, are we doing a episode of Eurovision, right? Because I got a big game tomorrow, and I'm ready to talk about it already. I can guarantee you that much.
May have to push this to next week.
Push it to next week. That's fine. That's fine. I know you got a busy schedule.
Well, Will Bowling and I are launching our UT podcast this Wednesday, and it's going to start getting hectic with all the podcasts squeezing them in. But yes, we will get to it next week. UT baseball wins
like 5 baseball games, and now they got new podcasts coming out.
Dude, Lucas just hit the big time, man. He's getting too busy for us.
Tennessee gets a winner, and this is what happens.
You're exactly right. The Vols are going to show their ass the minute they start. Like, if this baseball thing hasn't clued you into how bad it's going to be if UT football ever comes back to relevancy, you have no idea what's going on. It's going to be crazy.
God bless us all.
All right, guys, listen, we're doing this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Podcast format, get it wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, everything. Rate, review. Thank you for listening. Hey, guys, listen, we're going to bring this to you every week like we have for 3 full years now going into week 4. We call it like we see it. We shoot straight. When the team's up, we're going to cover it fair. When the team's down, we're going to cover it fair. We're going to bring it to you the same way every single time. And I'll say from the bottom of my heart, I think we're the only people who do that just totally candidly every single week we cover this club. We love doing it. We know you guys like this team, and we want to get you the content that you want every single week. So check us out at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. Check us out on 1045thezone.com. And as always, thank you for listening. I'm Davey Shepard. We'll be back soon with another episode of Speedway Soccer. Later.